Hello, this is Sean with the podcast Thrive Not Survive After Abuse, with yet another episode of this podcast, and it's number 105. We are going to talk about the need for connection, and it's in the series of the 6 human needs that we all have, and they need to be fulfilled in a certain way. We call it in a healthy way, and if it exists in a healthy way, then also there is an unhealthy way of fulfilling that. If we talk about the need for connection and love, then we actually mean that between human beings, so to speak, right? There's other types of love too. You can love art or dance and stuff like that, but that's not immediately the connection that I'm talking about here. It's literally what relationships do you have, and how valuable and how profound are these for you. Now, just let's look at it quite simple. You could easily see that there are different types of relationships that you have. You have family, you have people, and that doesn't necessarily has to be the same. You have people where you have a very deep and profound and even an intimate relationship with. You have people that you kind of a little bit on the outer periphery of your life, and they are look like casual people, you know of them, stuff like that. Well, a good mixture of all these nuances of relationship, that would actually be a very healthy thing to have. A lot of people have that, but more and more, one part is on the influence of technology, we kind of lose that real connection that we have, right? Some people are solely depending on the social media connection that they have, and as we know, they could be very real, but unfortunately they can also be very unreal and fake even, right? I mean, anyone now can take any identity on social media that they want, so it's way harder actually to find out how real your connections are. To make it really simple, I sometimes say, there are only 2 groups in your life. The group is one hand, have the group that is your tribe, the people that support you, that know what is going on in your life. You can go to them, they don't judge you over the things that you do, they support you even if they don't always agree what you do. You go to there for counsel and advice. And then you have the other group, and that is the group of your family and your friends. And you might now be a little bit confused because you would say, hey, but my real friends support me and my family supports me too. Not necessarily always, right? Because that doesn't mean that you don't have a good relationship with you, but I personally have experienced, maybe I'm the only one, but I don't think so, otherwise I wouldn't bring it up, that the things that I want to do in life, I mean, my family is always behind me, of course, but they don't always necessarily understand what you're going through and what you've been busy with. But it's always a connection that is valuable. So the only thing that I want to point out is that there are different level of connections that you have and that you need to have. Now, how would it look like if you have unhealthy connections, right? Now, for instance, if you're in an abusive situation, after all, this podcast is often about abuse, yeah, you do have a connection, but there is, and I'm not always talking about sexual abuse or even violently abused. If there is an unhealthy dependency from one person to the other, that is a form of abuse. So if one person can have a power, an unhealthy power, I'm not talking about an authority, right, but a power over the other, and leverage over the other, and it's misusing that's a very unhealthy connection that you have in life. And so in one hand, it feels like it's fulfilled, and that's the reason why some people stay in an unhealthy relationship, because they feel that the need for connection is fulfilled and they cannot see that it is unhealthy. Now, specifically, abuse victims, they might suffer from that. If it's domestic violence, then and I noticed that from the abuse situations that I have been in as a child, in one way you also feel dependent of of that relationship that you have. That's an unhealthy way of connections. Another example. Sorry if I triggered you with this one. But another example is, something that parents and children always go through. It's really good to have a good relationship with your parents, but at some point in time they have to, let the child go, let them explore the world and all the kind of things. With most families, that goes really well, but in some cases we sometimes see that that the child stays for too long a child, right? And you see that, and children becomes less and less independent. They might think that they are dependent, but they stay very longer than in the past dependent of their parents, right? So that's another way of looking at connections that maybe are less healthy. And then of course you have the last extreme that I want to go into in this podcast, at least. That is if you actually long for a connection that you don't have, and it could be, you could feel completely alone. That doesn't mean that you are alone, yeah, but you could feel alone because you don't have good connection. I see that often with bachelors who are at a certain age and they either lost their partner or they broke up for some sort of reason, and the older you get, it's sometimes not easier to get a partner. And no matter what they do, there's always this, this space in himself, this this void that needs to be fulfilled, right? And as long as you do that in a good way, then that's okay. But sometimes we do that in an unhealthy way. We go to shady dating sites and all that kind of stuff. And think about it, these dating sites exist because they know that there is a need for connection. Now obviously in everything in life you have quality of these things, but we definitely see also there are shady dating sites, and it's not only that they are after your money, but they might not connect the people within the right mindset, right? Now this is not here again, I'm not riding the moral high ground, but sometimes you just think that you only need some physical attention, and you could easily disappear in that shady world of only getting physical attention, which doesn't fulfill the need for connection at all. So it's not an easy thing to assess. It looks like one of the most easiest to understand needs, but in fact it's actually a very complex one. What you could do is actually, if you say, hey, I'm struggling there a little bit, it's just big piece of paper, right? Write your own name in the middle, and then write circles around you and what names you have and how close you think that they are to you. So if it's your best friend, maybe you draw that circle of your best friend very close to your circle. If it's, and even if it's a family member, if you feel, okay, it's my dad, but I feel that he's very far away from me to have a healthy connection with. Now, if you do that, you start to immediately see that, your spouse, your children should be literally close to you, right? And then in the circle around that, probably your family members and your best friends. Circle around that, maybe your colleagues and your good neighbors. Circle around that, maybe your acquaintances. If you do that and you see, okay, that's how my picture looks like, then probably it's a good way to do that. But if you see that these people that you call your best friend, but if you really feel, do I have a real connection with them, and you have to actually put them on the edge of the paper. And the same thing with your families and my siblings. I hardly see them, I have no connection with them, these things starts to eat at you, make that visual first, and then maybe in a later episode, or you send me a PM, personal message, we maybe make a plan. How do you create maybe more healthy connections in your life? All right. So I mentioned the relationship for abuse victims. It's one of the areas, if maybe not the most important area, where abuse victims suffer a lot. First of all, that's what I had. I don't want to have anyone close to me. I mean, for a long time, it appears like that, but in reality, I never let someone really come close to me, just because I'm afraid that I will be hurt in the end anyhow. I'm not saying it's right, but it's something that I hear back from a lot of abuse victims at all. So we have a trust issue. And at the same time, I also went out and created a lot of fake shallow relationship just to fulfill that need, and it was never good enough for me. Right? It was never did. I did not so good things in this area, and so if you want to read about that, it's actually I wrote it in my book. It's a struggle for strong and deep relationship is very much needed for everyone. The ones that often have a hard time to fulfill that are the people with an abuse victim, right? So this was your let me think about it. This was your fourth need that we are talking about. So the first two were certainty and variety. The third one was the need to have of significance, and the fourth one we talked about was about connections. So there's two more left, right? One we do tomorrow in the place.